Picture the brilliantly illuminated artificial savanna of your modern corporate break area, a fascinating synthetic habitat where human mammals congregate to compare their respective survival strategies. You constantly absorb the exact same directive every single time your compensation is distributed, a pervasive myth claiming that ultimate success requires nothing more than expending greater effort to harvest greater yields. Consequently, you voluntarily accept another weekend rotation, marking the third consecutive cycle of surrendering your personal time, adding 40 supplemental hours this month for the exact same hourly compensation rate of $19.50. Your lower extremities ache with profound fatigue by the time the weekend concludes, yet no one in this rigid concrete jungle ever whispers a word about the alternative method of survival. No one mentions the solitary law of financial nature that absolutely never demands the sacrifice of your precious weekend hours. This concealed rule is sitting silently inside your digital banking application at this very moment, completely neglected by you, quietly generating more actual value than the entire physical shift you just endured. You are certainly not isolated in your experience if you have spent years firmly believing that the only path to security is an endless sprint on this exhausting mechanical wheel. But the truth is far more captivating and profound. At 10 o'clock in the morning, you return to your designated workstation within the insurance agency, wearing your communication headset around your neck like a heavy beast of burden's yoke. Suddenly, a colleague from the claims department swivels her primary monitor toward you to proudly display the fresh leasing agreement she has just finalized. It features a pristine, unblemished motor vehicle from the upcoming production year of 2026, requiring a commitment of $549 every 30 days for 36 months with zero initial capital required. She verbally justifies this action by stating she simply felt she had earned the right to possess it, effectively expanding her vibrant financial plumage to establish dominance within the local flock. And you dutifully nod in agreement because you understand intimately the heavy psychological toll required to vocalize that specific sentiment and the devastating literal cost of actually following through with it. Your annual compensation rests at $58,000, and your colleague extracts roughly the equivalent amount of resources from this enclosed corporate ecosystem. The two of you dedicate the exact same portion of your lifespan to the enterprise, consume the identical mediocre caffeinated beverages from the communal area, and receive the identical notification of a 3% compensation increase every January. Yet somehow this specific consumer choice, this recurring monthly obligation, and a signature placed on a dotted line successfully projects a powerful illusion that she has advanced further up the hierarchical food chain. For one brief, fleeting moment beneath the sterile, artificial lighting of the communal gathering space, her display of synthetic wealth genuinely commands a primal sense of respect. Following this interaction, you retreat to your assigned cubicle and once again access the financial application on your handheld cellular device. However, on this particular occasion, you do not immediately terminate the program the moment your primary transactional account balance renders on the glowing screen. You deliberately scroll further down the interface, taking careful note of the $340 resting undisturbed in your secondary reserve account. Located just below that sits your employer-sponsored retirement portfolio, a mechanism you initiated 18 months prior during your initial onboarding process. It currently holds a reserve of $2,100, fueled significantly by the organization matching a 4% portion of your ongoing contributions. You attempt to calculate the combined total poorly in your biological brain, then verify the mathematics using a digital calculator, arriving at a sum just beneath the $2,500 threshold. This specific accumulation of resources is processed by your biological organism in a fundamentally different manner than your standard recurring payroll deposit. Your primary salary acts merely as a temporary influx of energy, passing through your hands in a continuous, endless transit meant only for immediate consumption. You reflect once more on your colleague's newly acquired luxury transport, but your mind is now processing a completely different, vastly more sophisticated form of mathematics. Her leasing arrangement demands $549 monthly for a depreciating asset that loses tangible value with every single rotation of its tires on the pavement. Conversely, your systematic contribution to the retirement portfolio sits at $180 each month, functioning as an entirely automatic, invisible process that actively fortifies your position rather than depleting it. Absolutely no member of your professional pack ever rotates their computer screen to boast about the steady, unglamorous compounding of their long-term investment vehicles. The maximum allowable contribution threshold for your specific retirement mechanism is $24,500 for the current solar cycle. You are not even remotely close to approaching that level of security, given your present relatively modest compensation package. However, you discover another fascinating biological fact later that day, while carefully examining the microscopic text governing your specific employment benefits package. The absolute maximum threshold, combining your personal allocations with the supplemental injections from your corporate employer, actually reaches a staggering $72,000. You are currently not utilizing these expansive limits to their full potential. In fact, you are barely participating in this grand, global mechanism of wealth accumulation. But for the very first time in your adult existence, this quiet participation feels like the most crucial element of survival, rendering the flashy vehicle lease as nothing more than a ridiculous masquerade costume. That evening, as you navigate your aging 2019 motor vehicle with 91,000 accumulated miles toward your dwelling, you no longer feel isolated or left behind by the migrating herd. You have actively ignored the glowing engine warning indicator since the month of March, yet you suddenly comprehend the genuine rules of survival dictating this concrete wilderness. The only metric of genuine consequence is the singular number that remains steadfast by your side, slowly assembling your defensive perimeter against future hardship. And this realization transforms into your primary area of concern, because the vast majority of what currently remains beside you is not experiencing any growth whatsoever. Your existing capital is being consumed alive on a daily basis by a different, entirely silent parasite that carries your legal name and wields a remarkably hostile interest rate. You have avoided opening this specific financial statement for 3 entire weeks, harboring a naive hope that you could slaughter this debt through the sheer force of willful ignorance. This digital statement continues to languish in your electronic mailbox, completely unread, its subject line gradually fading into a muted gray tone due to advancing age. You finally summon the courage to access the document while resting on your living room sofa on a quiet Sunday evening, placing a dish of reheated pasta nearby. The outstanding balance resting on your primary credit card displays a massive obligation of $6,380. The annualized percentage rate attached to this burden is a brutal 23.99%, acting as a relentless force of financial gravity. This invisible parasite demands a minimum monthly sacrifice from you, amounting to exactly $159 just to maintain its current size. You are intimately familiar with this specific number because you carefully nurtured this predator over a long period, employing the exact same gradual methods used by most careless members of the human species. Initially, the burden originated from a standard security deposit requirement for which you lacked the immediate liquid capital at that specific moment in time. Following that, a painful dental procedure in the month of February added to the weight, and later you financed commercial air travel to attend a relative's matrimonial ceremony. A neighbor residing down your hallway once casually mentioned that he simply submits the minimum required payment and actively refuses to grant the situation any further mental bandwidth. He leaned casually against the communal mail receptacles and confidently declared that $150 a month was basically an invisible, inconsequential fraction of his resources. During that interaction, you merely offered a silent nod of agreement, passively accepting this incredibly common and highly destructive financial illusion as objective reality. But tonight, seated alone on your sofa, you engage in the terrifying mathematical calculations that your carefree neighbor has consistently refused to perform. At an interest rate of 23.99%, by surrendering only the minimum required tribute, it will require more than 9 solar years to completely eradicate this $6,380 obligation. You will ultimately sacrifice more than $6,900 to the predatory system solely in the form of interest penalties, a sum vastly exceeding the original borrowed amount. The reality of this math feels exactly like a secondary monthly housing rental payment that you voluntarily accepted without ever reviewing the terms of the agreement. If this brutal truth regarding the mathematics of minimum payments has altered your perspective, please subscribe to our channel so we may continue restoring justice to your understanding of nature. This specific credit card operates using the exact same underlying mechanism of compound interest, yet it functions in a completely reversed, entirely destructive direction. The identical, relentless daily compounding math is applied, but instead of constructing something beneficial, it systematically dismantles your future stability one billing cycle after another. What your neighbor so casually dismisses as a minor inconvenience is, in stark reality, a 9-year sentence of servitude, carrying a massive invisible penalty fee. You open a secondary browser tab on your machine, not with the intention of transferring this burdensome balance to a different financial institution. You have not yet established a sufficient credit history to qualify for a 0% introductory offer from a competing predatory entity. You take this action now to actively construct a realistic numerical strategy, replacing the imaginary timeline you had previously used to soothe your anxiety. Dividing your total outstanding obligation across an 18-month period yields a required monthly extraction of $354. This is a highly uncomfortable metric that demands the immediate cancellation of your premium fitness application subscription and several other habitual comforts. It signifies that you must manually prepare your midday meals and transport them to the office, rather than routinely ordering expensive delivery services from local culinary establishments. It also dictates a painful refusal to attend another upcoming matrimonial celebration for your neighbor's sibling, and you already feel the creeping dread of having to deliver that negative response. However, enduring 18 months at this rigorous, disciplined pace will cost you approximately $1,350 in interest, rather than the devastating $6,900. You transcribe this life-saving calculation onto a small piece of adhesive paper and attach it directly to the bezel of your personal computing device. You do not place it there as a source of cheap, superficial motivation, but rather as a cold, indisputable biological fact necessary for your continued survival. You absolutely refuse to lose ground to the predator again in the same manner you surrendered those 3 weeks by simply avoiding an electronic message. Your rectangular plastic card would continue to function obediently at the checkout terminals of local supermarkets, providing a false sense of ongoing security. The underlying digit would simply continue its ominous expansion in that dark, neglected corner of your mind where you have trained yourself never to cast your gaze. Instead of taking this effortless path, you bravely configure an automated transfer of $354, scheduled to initiate its first extraction this upcoming Friday. You intently watch the bank's confirmation screen load, experiencing an internal sensation that registers far closer to primal terror than any form of desired relief. This fear manifests because these funds represent real, vital resources departing a paycheck that was already stretched uncomfortably thin before you ever began tracking these invisible flows. This exact pressure illustrates precisely why liquid capital you do not yet possess, which must be stored securely in an accessible location, is about to assume incredible significance. We will now examine the concept of the 6-month survival wall, a vital biological security system designed to insulate you from unexpected environmental shocks. Approximately 3 weeks after initiating your newly aggressive debt reduction payments, your aging vehicle delivers a harsh response to a question you never even asked. The illuminated engine warning indicator ceases its intermittent flashing and transitions to a solid, continuous glow, signaling an immediate mechanical crisis. 2 days following this ominous change, the machine simply refuses to ignite its combustion process in the parking facility outside the insurance office at 17:47 hours. The concrete parking structure is already half empty, and the evening sky is adopting that flat, grayish-orange hue unique to the fading days of a cold October. The operator of a local vehicle recovery transport, an experienced individual who has navigated these streets for over a decade, hauls your broken machine to the nearest repair facility. The following morning, you receive a highly discouraging diagnostic report from the stern mechanical technicians responsible for assessing the damage. Your primary mode of transportation requires a complete replacement of its power generation unit, along with a serpentine belt that had been operating on borrowed time for far too long. Exactly $612 for replacement components and skilled labor must be surrendered in physical currency or immediate digital transfer before they will release your vehicle. You currently possess a meager reserve of exactly $340 in your accessible banking accounts. 3 weeks prior, your liquid reserves also stood at $340, right before you began desperately hurling every available unit of currency toward escaping the credit card predator. Seated in the uncomfortable waiting area of the repair facility, you finally execute the specific mathematical calculation that you should have completed an entire month ago. You are critically deficient by exactly $272, a gap that must be bridged immediately to restore your mobility. The most readily available source of these required funds is the exact same high-interest credit card you have spent the last 3 weeks heroically attempting to diminish. This is the terrifying juncture where financial concepts permanently cease to be abstract theories printed within the pages of intelligent economic literature. All the previous academic discussions regarding interest rates and compounding gravity were entirely factual, but they had remained purely theoretical exercises in your mind. This represents the subtle yet fundamental boundary separating a simple daily inconvenience from a genuine life-threatening emergency in the modern wilderness. The sole physical barrier standing between those two distinct realities is the presence of gathered resources that already exist somewhere with your name securely attached to them. You are forced to place the required $272 back onto the plastic card because it represents the only viable survival option available in that room. Watching that painful transaction process, you comprehend a fundamental truth of human evolution, feeling the weight of it directly in your chest without needing further explanation. The 6 months of living expenses that financial experts constantly preach about is not merely an abstract savings target for the wealthy or disciplined. It is a literal, physical wall that was supposed to stand firmly between your peace of mind and this desperate, reactionary transaction, but you had not yet constructed it. Your colleague previously mentioned that she maintains 4 months of survival capital in a specialized, completely untouched account designed exclusively for emergencies. She described this strategy as an intentionally boring decision, and at the time you simply offered a polite, uncomprehending nod in response. Walking out of the repair facility with a functional generator and a slightly expanded balance on your debt instrument, that rule no longer seems remotely boring. It resonates as the absolute defining boundary between enduring a slightly frustrating Tuesday and suffering through a catastrophically devastating calendar year. Your fundamental monthly obligations, strictly encompassing shelter, vital insurance, sustenance, and transportation fuel, calculate to approximately $2,100. Multiplying this foundational baseline by 6 months yields a target of $12,600, representing the total mass required to secure your defensive perimeter. This massive figure exists so far beyond your current reality of $340 that reaching it feels absolutely impossible for your organism to achieve. For a fleeting moment, the weight of that impossibility genuinely threatens to crush your resolve, but you are not attempting to construct the entire wall this week. You will forge the first $100 of this sturdy barrier this upcoming Friday, taking the initial critical step toward absolute sovereignty. That very night, you establish a separate, designated account before your anxious brain can rationalize abandoning the idea, and you transfer $50 into it. These are funds for which your tight budget technically has no available space, but you relocate them anyway, prioritizing your long-term survival over immediate comfort. This small deposit does not constitute a sturdy defensive wall. It merely represents the very first brick laid in the foundation of your future fortress. However, lurking beneath all of this frantic activity is another, much quieter question regarding your evolution within this specific corporate environment. What exactly happens to your hourly value as a human resource when the machinery around you is functioning perfectly and nothing is actively breaking down? The engine of your earning capacity does not hesitate to deliver a harsh, uncompromising answer to this vital question of biological worth. On Monday morning, your direct supervisor summons you into a small, poorly ventilated conference room featuring broken window blinds that cast uneven shadows. With an almost apologetic tone in his voice, he informs you that your annual compensation increase has been set at a pitiful 3%. This is the exact same microscopic figure you received the previous year, and the year before that, firmly establishing your place within this corporate hierarchy. Your baseline salary of $58,000 is mathematically transformed into $59,740, a change that barely registers against inflation. You process this dismal calculation in your mind before you even navigate back to your designated seating assignment within the open plan office. After the mandatory deduction of governmental taxes, this adjustment translates to roughly $40 additional added to your monthly resource pool. This is actually less than the amount you just recently began allocating toward your newly established vehicle repair fund, highlighting the inadequacy of the reward. You sit motionless for an extended period, staring blankly at the dual monitors provided by your employer, one of which glows slightly dimmer than the other. Suddenly, you recall a passing comment made by your resourceful colleague regarding a freelance opportunity she had discovered at a small remote agency. She utilizes the exact same software proficiency she employs in the office, but executes the tasks from the comfort of her own dwelling. She explicitly stated that it is identical labor, but stripped of the artificial constraints and limitations permanently established by your mutual supervisor. This percentage is a barrier that your manager does not determine independently. It is decided high above him in a budgetary council where you will never be granted a voice. However, your actual practical ability to rapidly process complex claim files and document them immaculately possesses no such artificial limitation. It is constrained only by the boundaries you impose upon yourself through your own daily actions and willingness to expend effort outside the primary habitat. That evening, you illuminate your personal computing device not to review your debt balances, but to explore digital platforms designed for independent contractors. You construct a professional profile in a single hour, highlighting the two complex systems you navigate flawlessly, and subsequently forget about the endeavor for 4 days. Then, unexpectedly, a communication arrives from a small independent firm located in a distant geographic region, offering an alternative pathway. They propose an arrangement involving 15 specific files, compensating you at a rate of $22 per hour, performed entirely remotely during evening hours. It is not a massive influx of capital, but it represents real, tangible resources entirely disconnected from the ceiling imposed by your corporate manager. You are genuinely surprised to observe that you process these independent files significantly faster than similar tasks performed during your primary daytime employment. This increased velocity occurs because no supervisory entity is monitoring the clock, and the sole metric of value is the quality of the completed assignment. You also realize that the small display on your personal laptop is insufficient, causing you to strain your vision significantly by 22 hours. You evaluate a refurbished external monitor, priced at $189, and hesitate for 2 full days before finally authorizing the transaction. This acquisition is absolutely not a luxury, nor is it comparable to the ostentatious vehicle parked in the corporate lot designed purely for status signaling. It is a mandatory tool that facilitates your supplementary income stream without completely destroying your ocular health in the process. By the conclusion of the month, combining the pitiful corporate raise with these new independent files, you have successfully added approximately $340 to your budget. For the very first time, this specific numeric value originated from a source that your corporate manager never had and will never have any access to. Then, the small supplementary arrangement from the distant geographic region rapidly evolves into a genuine proposal for full-time employment. It is a nascent enterprise consisting of 4 individuals operating without a physical office, developing software to completely automate the tasks you currently perform manually. The founder proposes a base compensation of $52,000, which is a conscious reduction from the amount you steadily earn in your current habitat. However, she also includes an offer of 0.75% equity in the company, vesting gradually over a 4-year period. Your intelligent colleague carefully reviews this proposal and bluntly states that it represents a tangible decrease in your immediate, guaranteed survival resources. Yet you are already aware that this founder's previous supervisor acquired approximately $4 million from a remarkably similar arrangement in the past. No individual can predict with absolute certainty whether this small enterprise will undergo a similar metamorphosis in the unpredictable future. This represents a classic asymmetric wager in the wild, where you can clearly and accurately define your absolute worst-case scenario in advance. Your maximum potential exposure is exactly $7,740 of lost guaranteed salary over the course of a single solar cycle. This is not a fatal wound to your organism. It is merely a superficial bruise that you can easily endure and recover from. The shares in this new enterprise are restricted by nothing other than how massive the business might become as a direct result of your dedicated efforts. If this bold wager proves successful, that fraction of a multi-million-dollar valuation will permanently alter the decade in which you are able to cease mandatory labor. You perform an entirely new type of mathematics that night while staring intently at the glowing screen of your newly acquired monitor. Assuming your baseline survival requirements remain at $2,100 monthly, the critical mass required for absolute freedom is $126,000. You compose an electronic message containing your formal acceptance at 23 hours and 40 minutes, finalizing the transition to a new ecosystem. You finally comprehend that absolute, infallible security was never truly available to you, even within the confines of that stable, incredibly boring corporate role. The protective ceiling provided by your previous manager was never guaranteed to remain intact for the next 10 years of your biological existence. It merely projected an aura of safety because it had not yet been genuinely tested by the predatory forces that constantly roam the economic landscape. Now you are consciously constructing a genuine financial fortress, acting as the primary architect of your own long-term survival and generational security. 5 months into your tenure at the new enterprise, you are traveling in a vehicle operated by your new superior, following a successful client engagement. She exhales deeply and remarks that she still has not inquired about the physical location of her aging father's last will and testament. A sudden wave of cold realization washes over you as you recognize that you are entirely ignorant of your own father's testamentary documents. That very night, you investigate a subject you had never previously considered during the carefree, uninformed chapters of your earlier existence. You review the pricing structures for term life insurance policies because for the very first time, something tangible relies entirely upon your continued physical presence. Your mother still harbors a genuine, quiet hope that you will eventually possess the capacity to assist her during her own vulnerable retirement years. Securing a policy designed to remain active for 20 years requires a monthly sacrifice of approximately $28 from your gathered resources. You do not yet possess a luxurious waterfront estate or massive sprawling accumulations of wealth to transfer to your potential descendants. However, you do maintain a growing brokerage account and an aging vehicle that is finally operating without mechanical interruptions. You initiate a voice communication with your father that Sunday, approaching the vital topic of critical documentation with careful, deliberate phrasing. He responds calmly, indicating that the vital paperwork is safely secured within a fire-resistant container located directly inside his garage facility. You terminate the connection and sit quietly at your kitchen table for a long duration, enveloped by the profound silence of your living space. This interaction did not feel like a triumphant victory. It felt like the tedious, unglamorous, yet absolutely essential maintenance of your life's infrastructure. But it is precisely this type of meticulous maintenance that keeps your fortress standing strong long after the initial walls have been erected. Somewhere amidst repairing the generator, acquiring company equity, and locating a fire-resistant safe, You permanently ceased to be just another vulnerable worker in the herd. You no longer wait in the state of panicked anticipation for a catastrophe to strike with every new billing cycle in this unpredictable world. You still monitor your accounts on most mornings, but you are no longer bracing yourself for the absolute worst-case scenario. Your aging vehicle still exhibits minor mechanical noises during cold mornings, and Tuesday will invariably demand significant effort and exertion on your part. But you are no longer counting mere pennies simply to survive another week surrounded by the relentless predators of the urban jungle. You monitor your resources now because you finally possess a crystal-clear understanding of exactly what you are building and precisely who your fortress is designed to protect. You have transcended the artificial hierarchy of the corporate savanna, establishing a quiet, unbreakable dominion over your own biological destiny.